Imagine a single line on a map that could, in one afternoon, send the global economy into panic. The Strait of Hormuz is one of those places. It looks almost too narrow to matter. And that is exactly what makes it dangerous. This is not just a strip of water. It is a pressure point for the entire world. When too much fear, too much oil, and too much history pass through one corridor, even a small disruption can feel enormous. Official energy assessments have described Hormuz as one of the world's most critical choke points. A huge share of global seaborne oil moves through this gap between Iran and Oman. A major share of global liquefied natural gas trade passes here as well. So when tension rises in Hormuz, distant cities react almost immediately. Fuel prices begin to jump. Insurance markets begin to tighten. Ships do not simply move forward. They hesitate, and the markets listen to that hesitation. And in the current crisis, that hesitation became visible. Not as rumor, but as a documented collapse in traffic. Maritime advisories described the historical daily average through Hormuz as far higher than what followed. Then came reports that traffic had fallen to only a fraction of its normal pace. One later advisory sounded even stranger. Only a handful of confirmed commercial cargo transits had been recorded across an entire day. Think about what that means. A route that normally breathes with constant movement was suddenly struggling to breathe at all. So the question becomes unavoidable. What kind of place can silence giant ships without ever disappearing from the map? And this is where the story gets darker. Because the most disturbing part of Hormuz is not only what moves through it, it is what begins to happen when trust starts breaking down inside the passage. Trust in routes, in signals, in screens, in voices, and in what a ship believes it sees. Official statements suggested that certain vessels could still pass safely, but the sea does not run on official statements alone. Some ships turned back anyway, and that told a harder truth than any press release. Permission on paper is one thing. Confidence at sea is another. Then came warnings from maritime organizations, and suddenly Hormuz stopped feeling like a normal shipping story. Those warnings described severe GNSS and GPS interference, AIS anomalies, intermittent signal loss, spoofing, jamming, and degraded positional reliability. One advisory warned that disruption could create false tracks, targets on a screen that were not actually there. Sailors reported unrealistic speed readings and sudden positional displacement. There were even warnings about ships appearing to move across land on digital monitors. Read that again, carefully. This was not legend, internet folklore, or some invented horror story. It was an official warning about reality becoming unreliable on screen. The records did not call these things ghosts. They called them anomalies. But the feeling they created was far more unsettling than that word suggests. Because if you were alone on a bridge at night, watching a contact drift where no contact should exist, you would feel the dread immediately. That is why Hormuz fits a Mystica file so well, not because the sea is magically cursed, but because documented facts already feel almost unreal. Mariners were told to trust visual bearings, radar ranges, and secondary systems. They were told to verify strange radio calls and question unexpected routing instructions. On paper, that sounds procedural. At sea, it means certainty no longer arrives first. A voice can reach the bridge before trust does. An order can arrive before identity is clear. A ship can be warned, hailed, redirected, or shadowed, without anyone feeling completely sure who is truly speaking from the darkness. One advisory even used a chilling word: shadowing. That one word changes the atmosphere instantly. Because shadowing is presence without full explanation. You know something is there. You simply do not know what it will do next. That is the modern Hormuz file, a place where the map still exists, but confidence inside the map has started to collapse. Now, to understand why this feels so heavy, you have to look backward. Hormuz carried this atmosphere long before the newest headlines. long before electronic spoofing entered public maritime language. During the 1980s, in the tanker war phase of the Iran-Iraq conflict, the strait became a graveyard of commercial movement. More than 100 oil tankers were struck in those waters. And that proved something the region has never really forgotten. Hormuz can look like a shipping lane on the surface, while functioning like a battlefield underneath. Commerce may continue, but normality does not. Ships may still move, but movement is not the same thing as safety. That is one of the oldest illusions of strategic waterways, that because a route remains open, it must still be secure. Hormuz has disproved that idea again and again. A passage can remain technically open while becoming psychologically broken. And once that happens, every transit becomes half navigation and half nerve. Every light on the horizon becomes a question. Every delay starts to feel like a signal. Every signal becomes something to doubt. And doubt is dangerous when the water is narrow. Because this is not open ocean, it is compressed ocean. Choices shrink quickly. Mistakes accelerate even faster. Fear does not spread outward here. It concentrates. That is why the history of Hormuz never really stays in the past. It keeps returning in new language. During the tanker war, the language was mines, missiles, escorts, and burning ships. Today, the language includes spoofing, false tracks, jamming, and critical threat advisories. But the emotional structure is almost identical. Movement under pressure, uncertainty under surveillance, danger hidden inside routine. Then came one of the darkest events ever tied to this waterway. Iran Air Flight 655. On the 3rd day of July in 1988, the passenger aircraft was shot down over the strait, killing everyone on board. The aircraft was flying in Iranian airspace, but it was misidentified as a fighter jet. That single fact should haunt anyone studying this region, because misidentification is the real horror of Hormuz. Not myth, not monsters, but human beings and systems under crushing pressure, reading the wrong signal at the wrong second. That is why modern warnings about interference feel heavier than ordinary updates. This water has already shown what happens when fear outruns clarity. And clarity is exactly what present advisories say is degrading. Signals drift, tracks distort, and identities become harder to trust. So the most grounded explanation for the strangeness is clear. Human conflict has turned Hormuz into a corridor of interference, hesitation, and pressure. That explanation is strong, because the documents support it. It explains the collapse in traffic, the insurance panic, the avoidance, and the growing tension around every transit. It explains why ships pause, why routes thin out, and why every crossing begins to feel political. It explains how a waterway can remain on the map and still begin to function like a warning. So yes, the simplest answer is this. Hormuz feels haunted because men made it that way, but that is only the surface. Because a strategic explanation does not erase the atmosphere these records create. Machines are supposed to make reality clearer. Here, they often do the opposite. GPS weakens. AIS misbehaves. Ships appear where they should not exist, or move in ways no real ship should move. A radio call comes through, and the advice is not to trust it immediately. The route remains open in theory, but in practice, vessels still turn back. And what makes that even more disturbing is that danger does not always arrive as a visible strike. Sometimes it arrives as hesitation. A captain slows down. A company delays a route. An insurer raises the cost. A crew begins asking different questions before departure. And that matters more than it sounds. Because fear in a choke point does not need to close the water completely. It only needs to change behavior. Once behavior changes, the passage begins to feel different, even before another attack takes place. The lanes are still there. The charts are still printed. The route is still technically open, but confidence inside that route begins to collapse. And once confidence collapses, the geography starts to feel smaller than the map suggests. Hormuz is already narrow by global standards. Under pressure, it becomes narrower in the mind. That is when routine turns fragile. A tanker is no longer just a tanker. It becomes a floating calculation. Every transit becomes a question of timing. Every hour becomes a test of nerve. Should a ship move in daylight, or does darkness offer less exposure? Should it stay in a known corridor, or does predictability create its own danger? Should the crew answer immediately, or pause before trusting the next voice on the radio? These are not dramatic questions invented for a script. They are the kinds of questions that appear when certainty starts to fracture. And that is what gives Hormuz its atmosphere. Not one single mystery, but multiple layers of uncertainty moving at once. Physical danger, electronic distortion, political pressure, human judgment. A place becomes truly unnerving when all of those things begin overlapping. And that is exactly what has happened here. That is also how folklore is born in modern form, not from ancient campfire stories, but from repeated nights of unstable reality. People do not need to invent monsters. They only need enough nights where the screen says one thing and the horizon says another, enough ships turning back, enough warnings about degraded confidence, enough official language that stays calm, while the lived experience underneath it becomes harder to trust. There is no clean ghost story here. And yet, the atmosphere starts to resemble one anyway, not because the paranormal has been proven, but because repeated uncertainty creates its own kind of folklore. Some waterways do not need legends to feel cursed. They manufacture that feeling out of casualty reports, warnings, and near misses. Hormuz is one of those places, a place where the facts themselves begin to sound like the outline of a myth. A ship can appear to cross land. A passenger plane can be mistaken for a threat in a moment. A voice can speak through the darkness before trust has had time to arrive. And in the current crisis, the file only grows darker. Projectiles, signal loss, spoofing, shadowing, and navigational doubt. If you place those details side by side, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The visible problem is never the whole problem, and the map is never the whole map. There is always another layer underneath it. Commercial, military, electronic, psychological. That is what makes Hormuz so powerful as a subject. It lets you talk about mystery without abandoning the record. Because the mystery is not whether ghosts live there. The mystery is how often this place turns certainty into visible doubt, how often systems fail just enough, how often pressure distorts judgment just enough, how often the world waits on a narrow passage and hopes nobody mistakes a signal for the truth again. On land, uncertainty feels like delay. At sea, uncertainty feels like presence. That is why phrases like positional offset and degraded integrity can feel almost supernatural in the middle of the night. The crew does not experience them as cold technical language. They experience them as a contact that should not be there, a route that suddenly feels wrong, a horizon that no longer behaves. And somewhere behind all of that, the wider world is still waiting for fuel, cargo, stability, and time. That may be the true mystica of Hormuz. Not hidden creatures, not ancient prophecy, not fabricated horror, just a modern passage so narrow, so strategic, and so saturated with force that reality inside it can begin to look unstable even when everything is still documented. The files do not say the water is haunted. They say traffic has collapsed, signals have degraded, and navigation has become harder to trust. The reports do not mention ghosts. They mention jamming, spoofing, interference, and fear. But when you read enough of those pages in sequence, you begin to understand why some places earn reputations without trying. Hormuz has earned one, not because the story is invented, but because the documented story already sounds unreal. What is known is clear. The Strait remains one of the most critical energy passages on Earth, and the current conflict has filled the file with warnings about attacks, injuries, signal interference, and navigational anomalies. What remains unresolved is how far this crisis will spread. How many more ships will hesitate, and how many more signals will blur, how many more times the world will hold its breath over this narrow strip of water. Subscribe for the next file. Because some mysteries are not buried in ruins, they are moving in plain sight. And next time, we open the file on the shadow war that taught an entire region how to strike without fully being seen.